I'm Madison, 34, and until last Friday, I was the star project manager at Apex Solutions, responsible for landing our company's biggest contract ever worth $50 million. When Robert, my boss, called me into his office that afternoon, his face was thunderous. I had no idea I was about to be fired for a disaster he created, or that a single clause I'd buried in the contract would bring the entire company to its knees overnight. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're from and subscribe to hear how I took back my power. My journey at Apex Solutions began 5 years ago when I joined as a junior project manager with big dreams and even bigger ambitions. I had just completed my master's in business administration with a focus on technology management, and Apex seemed like the perfect place to build my career. The company specialized in enterprise software implementation for large corporations, and I quickly found my niche in translating complex technical requirements into actionable project plans. Within 2 years, I had worked my way up to a senior project manager position, handling increasingly important clients and larger budgets. My reputation for delivering projects on time and under budget became my calling card. Richard, our CEO, often mentioned my successes during quarterly meetings, which initially made me proud but eventually painted a target on my back. The target came in the form of Robert Thompson, who was hired as the new director of project management 3 years into my tenure. Robert had an impressive resume with experience at several Fortune 500 companies, but from day one something felt off about his management style. He was all smiles with upper management, but cold and calculating with those who reported to him. Despite the challenging dynamics with Robert, I had built a phenomenal team that I trusted implicitly. Heather Davies was my technical lead, a brilliant programmer with an uncanny ability to foresee integration issues before they happened. Marcus Washington served as our systems architect, quiet and methodical, but absolutely brilliant when it came to designing robust technical solutions. Jessica Parker rounded out our core team as our client liaison with interpersonal skills that could smooth over even the most tense situations. Together, we functioned like a well-oiled machine tackling projects that other teams deemed too complex. Our reputation caught the attention of tech giant Industries, a Fortune 100 technology company, known for innovation and rigorous standards. They were seeking a partner for a complete overhaul of their customer relationship management system, a massive project that would touch every aspect of their business. The potential contract was valued at $50 million over 3 years, more than triple the size of any previous project Apex had secured. For 18 months, I cultivated the relationship with tech giant, particularly with William Chen, their chief technology officer. William was exacting and detail-oriented, but we developed a rapport based on mutual respect and honesty. If I thought something couldn't be done, I told him. If he needed something urgently, I made it happen. This straightforward approach earned his trust, a commodity more valuable than gold in our industry. The bidding process was grueling. 5 companies were invited to compete, all with stronger market positions than Apex. Robert initially wanted to assign the proposal to another team, claiming it was too important for my group. Richard overruled him, citing our relationship with William as a crucial advantage. During the proposal phase, I made personal sacrifices that still sting when I think about them. I missed my sister's wedding because the final presentation was scheduled for the same weekend. I worked through a case of pneumonia that should have had me hospitalized, joining client calls with a fever of 103 degrees. My team showed similar dedication, with Marcus canceling a family vacation and Heather regularly pulling all-nighters to perfect our technical approach. While drafting the contract, I insisted on an unusual clause that Robert fought against. Section 16.4 stated that I must remain as project lead for the duration of the implementation, or tech giant would have grounds to review the contract terms. Robert called it presumptuous and unprofessional, but William supported it, telling Robert, "We're buying Madison's expertise as much as Apex's services." Little did I know this clause would eventually save me. When tech giant selected Apex for the contract, the company erupted in celebration. Richard called an all-hands meeting where he personally thanked me and my team, presenting us with bonuses and public recognition. I noticed Robert standing in the back of the room, clapping mechanically, his smile never reaching his eyes. The early planning stages were filled with excitement. Both companies seemed aligned with weekly strategy sessions and detailed implementation plans. My team was expanded with additional resources, and we were given a dedicated workspace to focus exclusively on the tech giant project. For a brief moment, everything felt perfect. The first signs of trouble appeared subtly. Robert began changing timelines without consulting me, shifting resources temporarily to other projects, claiming they were urgent but would return shortly. When I raised concerns, he dismissed them as overreactions and reminded me that he had the final say on resource allocation. Despite my growing uneasiness, I remained determined to make the project succeed. Every obstacle Robert placed in our path, I found a way around. Every delay he caused, I compensated for by working longer hours. My team followed my lead, committed to delivering excellence regardless of the circumstances. We had no idea just how difficult those circumstances would become. 3 months into the project, Robert's interference escalated from annoying to alarming. He began changing technical specifications without consulting me or the team, despite having limited technical knowledge himself. These changes often contradicted the carefully crafted architecture we had designed based on tech giants' requirements. The situation came to a head during a crucial planning meeting with William and his team. We were discussing the data migration strategy, a particularly sensitive topic given the volume and complexity of tech giants' customer information. I had prepared a comprehensive approach that Heather and Marcus had spent weeks refining. Just as I was walking through the final validation steps, Robert interrupted. "Actually, we're going to take a different approach," he announced, pulling up a slide deck I had never seen before. "Madison's plan is too cautious. We can streamline this process and save tech giant 2 months of transition time." William looked confused, glancing between Robert and me. The plan Robert presented was not only technically unsound, but potentially dangerous for data integrity. When William asked a question about fail-safe measures, I started to respond, but Robert cut me off. "Madison is being overly cautious again," he said with a condescending smile. "I've handled dozens of migrations larger than this. Trust me, this approach is industry standard." Later that afternoon, I requested a private meeting with Robert to discuss what had happened. I kept my tone professional, focusing on the technical risks rather than his behavior. "Robert, the migration approach you presented today hasn't been tested with datasets of this complexity. There's a significant risk of data corruption or loss if we proceed that way." He leaned back in his chair, staring at me coldly. "This is my department, Madison. Know your place. I didn't get where I am by playing it safe like you do. But the contract specifically outlines the approach we originally proposed," I countered. "Contracts can be amended," he replied dismissively. "Now, unless there's anything else, I have a meeting with Richard." Shaken, I went to Patricia Reynolds in Human Resources, hoping for some guidance on navigating the situation. Patricia had been with the company for over 15 years and had always seemed fair-minded. I explained the situation, focusing on the potential risks to the project rather than personal conflicts. Patricia listened politely, nodding occasionally, but when I finished, her response left me cold. "These technical disagreements happen all the time, Madison. Robert is your superior, and ultimately these decisions fall under his authority. Perhaps you should focus more on being a team player." I left her office feeling deflated but more determined than ever to protect the project and my team. That evening, I started documenting every change Robert made, every instance he contradicted established plans, every risk I identified. I also backed up all original documentation and email exchanges with tech giants, storing them securely. My friend Rachel, who worked as a director at another technology firm, met me for dinner that weekend. When I described the situation, her face grew serious. "Madison, this isn't normal workplace friction. He's actively sabotaging you. I've seen this before, usually when someone feels threatened by a competent woman. Document everything, but also start looking at your options outside Apex." "I can't abandon this project," I told her. "Tech Giant trusted me personally with this implementation. My team has invested so much already." Rachel shook her head. "Just keep your resume updated. Promise me that much." The first project milestone presentation should have been a celebration of our initial progress. My team had worked around the clock to compensate for Robert's disruptions, and we had managed to complete the infrastructure setup phase on schedule. I prepared a comprehensive presentation, highlighting our accomplishments and next steps. However, when the meeting began, Robert took over, presenting our work as if it had been his direction all along. Even worse, he took credit for solving several critical issues that had arisen specifically because of his interference. William caught my eye during the presentation, his expression questioning. After the formal meeting, William pulled me aside. Is everything okay, Madison? Some of what Robert presented today seems different from what we discussed in our planning sessions. I found myself in the difficult position of having to defend decisions I didn't agree with while maintaining professionalism. We've had to make some adjustments as we've progressed. I'm monitoring everything closely to ensure we meet all requirements. William studied me for a moment. I trust you, Madison. That's why we chose Apex. Just make sure what gets built is what we actually need. His words weighed heavily on me as the project continued. I found myself working late into the night redoing work that Robert had sabotaged or correcting misaligned specifications. My team followed suit, with Heather often sleeping on the office couch rather than going home. During a team meeting in a small conference room away from Robert's office, Jessica voiced what everyone was thinking. Why are we letting him get away with this? The client clearly wants our original approach. We have to be strategic, I explained, though the words tasted bitter. Robert has Richard's ear right now. If we openly defy him, he could have us all removed from the project. And would that be worse than what's happening now? Marcus asked quietly. It was a question I couldn't answer. The constant stress began taking its toll on my health. I started experiencing insomnia, lying awake, replaying confrontations with Robert, or anticipating the next day's challenges. My usually healthy appetite disappeared, and I lost 15 pounds in a month. Anxiety became my constant companion, my heart racing every time a meeting with Robert appeared on my calendar. Despite our best efforts, the first significant deadline was missed when a development environment crashed due to last-minute changes Robert had insisted on. The team worked 48 hours straight to recover, but the damage was done. William sent a formal email expressing concern about the missed deadline, copying Richard and other executives. Robert's response was to schedule a project review meeting without inviting me, then informed Tech Giant that the delay was due to resource allocation issues within Madison's team. When I confronted him with the email chain I had been copied on accidentally, he merely shrugged. Perception is reality in this business, Madison. Perhaps if you spent less time questioning my decisions and more time managing your team, we wouldn't be having these issues. I left his office feeling a mixture of rage and helplessness I had never experienced before. The project was beginning to slip away, and with it, my professional reputation and possibly my entire career. 6 months into the project, the problems had multiplied beyond my ability to quietly fix them. Robert's interference had created a tangled web of technical incompatibilities, missed requirements, and growing client frustration. What made it worse was his new tactic of excluding me from key client meetings, then briefing me afterward with his own interpretation of what had been discussed. During one particularly frustrating week, I discovered that Robert had been modifying my status reports to management before passing them along. My honest assessments of project challenges were being rewritten to minimize problems or shift blame onto my team. I only learned of this when Richard referenced a communication issue with the development team that I had supposedly reported something I had never written. The situation reached a new low during a technical review meeting where Tech Giant's entire implementation committee was present. A critical integration had failed during testing, an issue that stemmed directly from Robert's insistence on using an untested middleware solution rather than the established approach we had originally proposed. Rather than acknowledge the real source of the problem, Robert turned to my team. This is exactly what happens when technical resources don't follow established protocols, he said, looking directly at Heather. Your team assured me this integration was tested, Madison. We did test it, Heather replied, her voice tight with controlled anger. We provided documentation showing the issues with the middleware approach 3 weeks ago and recommended returning to the original design. Robert's face darkened. That's not my recollection of events. Perhaps you should review your notes more carefully before contradicting me in front of our client. The meeting deteriorated from there, with William attempting to mediate while looking increasingly concerned. Afterward, Heather followed me into my office and closed the door. I can't do this anymore, Madison, she said, her voice breaking. He's destroying my professional reputation along with this project. I've already updated my resume. Please don't go. I begged, feeling panic rise in my chest. Losing Heather would be catastrophic for the project and a personal blow I wasn't sure I could handle. I promise I'll fix this somehow. How, she demanded. You've tried talking to HR, you've tried documenting everything. He has Richard completely fooled. Give me 2 more weeks, I pleaded. If things haven't improved by then, I'll help you find a new position myself." Reluctantly, she agreed, but I could see the resignation in her eyes. She no longer believed things would get better, and honestly, neither did I. I decided to make one more attempt to speak directly with Richard. I scheduled time with his assistant, explaining that it concerned the tech giant project. The next day, my appointment was canceled with a brief note. "Richard asks that all tech giant matters be directed through Robert to maintain clear communication channels." The walls were closing in. My usual energy was replaced by a constant fatigue that coffee couldn't cure. I developed persistent headaches and noticed my hands would shake when I was particularly stressed. When I caught myself snapping at Jessica over a minor formatting issue, I realized how close I was to breaking. The technical problems continued to multiply. Marcus had warned that a particular authentication framework Robert insisted on wouldn't integrate properly with tech giant's existing security infrastructure. When Robert dismissed his concerns, Marcus documented his objections in an email to both of us, protecting himself professionally. When the integration test failed exactly as Marcus had predicted, Robert called him obstructionist and suggested he was deliberately sabotaging the project. Tech giant's patience was wearing thin. William sent a formal letter of concern about the project direction, requesting a comprehensive review of the implementation approach and timeline. The letter specifically requested my input on resolving the technical challenges, which infuriated Robert. I was in the break room when I overheard Robert on his phone in the adjacent conference room, clearly not realizing I was within earshot. "William has been going around me contacting Madison directly," he was saying, presumably to Richard. "She's been undermining the project from the beginning, feeding him concerns to make herself look better. If we want to salvage this contract, we need to consider restructuring the team leadership." I felt physically ill hearing him twist the situation so completely. What made it worse was knowing that Richard was likely believing every word. Despite the growing hostility from management, my team remained remarkably loyal. We had formed a protective unit, sharing information and supporting each other through the increasingly difficult environment. When Marcus was blamed for the authentication failure, the entire team stayed late to help him document the decision trail that proved he had warned of the exact outcome that occurred. As the project continued to deteriorate, I found myself reviewing the contract more frequently, particularly Section 16.4 that specified my role as project lead. At the time, it had seemed like a point of professional pride and client confidence. Now it felt like it might be the only leverage I had left. The next major milestone was the integrated system demonstration, a critical showcase of the core functionality we had built so far. Despite our preparations, I was terrified of what might happen. Robert had made last-minute changes to the configuration without testing, ignoring Jessica's warnings about potential instability. My fears were realized in the worst possible way. During the demonstration to Tech Giant's executive team, including their CEO, the system crashed completely when attempting to process a basic customer transaction. The error logs clearly showed the issue stemmed from Robert's configuration changes, but in the moment, all the client saw was a failed demonstration and a project in trouble. William's disappointment was visible, though he maintained professionalism. Richard, who had attended to show executive support, was visibly angry. As the meeting broke up, he pulled Robert aside, their conversation intense but too quiet to overhear. Later that evening, William called me directly. "Madison, I need you to be completely honest with me. Is this project salvageable? With the current approach?" "With the original approach, yes," I told him. "But I don't have the authority to return to that path." There was a long pause before William spoke again. "I see. That's very concerning. Tech Giant has invested significantly in this partnership, based largely on our confidence in you specifically." "I'm doing everything I can," I said, hearing the desperation in my own voice. "I know you are," he replied gently. "That's why this situation is so troubling." After we hung up, I sat in my darkened apartment, the realization washing over me that both the project and my job were in serious jeopardy. What I didn't know was how quickly everything would unravel. The failed demonstration became the breaking point for the project. The system crash in front of Tech Giant's executive team wasn't just embarrassing. It raised fundamental questions about Apex's competence to deliver such a complex implementation. While my team scrambled to identify and document the exact causes of the failure, Robert was busy crafting a narrative that placed the blame squarely on us. The morning after the demonstration, an emergency executive meeting was called. I wasn't invited, but Marcus, who had been installing updates in the executive conference room earlier, told me he had seen Richard Robert and several board members gathering. The expressions on their faces had been grim. For the next 2 days, an eerie calm descended. Robert was conspicuously absent from the office, and rumor had it he was in constant meetings with Richard and the legal team. My team and I continued working, trying to salvage what we could of the project while awaiting whatever storm was brewing. The storm broke on Friday afternoon. At 3:30 p.m., I received a terse email from Patricia in HR. Please report to conference room A, immediately. Bring your company ID. My stomach dropped as I read it. I knew what was coming, but the reality was still shocking. When I entered the conference room, Richard, Robert, and Patricia were seated on one side of the table, a united front. Richard's face was set in stern lines. Patricia looked uncomfortable but determined, and Robert had a barely concealed look of triumph in his eyes. Madison, please sit down. Richard began, his tone formal and cold. Nothing like the warm congratulations he had offered when we first secured the tech giant contract. I'll get straight to the point. After careful review of the tech giant project status and yesterday's catastrophic demonstration, we've determined that a change in project leadership is necessary. Effective immediately, your employment with Apex Solutions is terminated. Though I had anticipated this possibility, hearing the words spoken aloud sent a physical shock through my body. Before I could respond, Robert leaned forward. The project is months behind schedule over budget, and the client has expressed serious concerns about the direction. Your team has consistently failed to meet benchmarks and has resisted guidance from senior management. I found my voice, though it shook slightly. That's completely false. My team has been working around the clock to compensate for constant interference and changes that were made against our recommendations. If you check the documentation. Robert's face flushed with anger. Documentation. We have documentation of your failures. The demonstration yesterday was just the final straw in a pattern of incompetence. That failure was directly caused by the configuration changes you insisted on making without testing. I countered my shock, giving way to anger. Robert slammed his hand on the table. Be grateful we're not suing you for the damage you've done to this company's reputation. Your insubordination and inability to work collaboratively have cost us dearly. Richard held up a hand to silence Robert. Madison, this decision is final. We're also terminating Heather Davies, Marcus Washington, and Jessica Parker, effective today. The project requires a fresh approach with team members who can work constructively with management. The realization that my entire team was being fired along with me was more painful than my own termination. These people had trusted me, followed my lead, worked themselves to exhaustion for this project. And now they were collateral damage in Robert's campaign against me. You can't do this, I said, my voice barely a whisper. We already have, Robert replied smugly. Security will escort you to collect your personal items. Company property, including your laptop and phone, will remain here. Patricia slid a document across the table. This is your termination agreement. You'll receive 2 weeks severance pay contingent upon signing this non-disparagement clause. I stared at the document without touching it. And if I don't sign? Then you leave with nothing, Robert said. Your choice. I stood up, leaving the document untouched. I'll need to review this with my attorney. Richard looked surprised, as if he hadn't expected resistance. Madison, be reasonable. This agreement is standard. So is legal review of termination documents, I replied, finding strength in the procedural aspect of the situation. A security guard was waiting outside the conference room. The humiliation of being escorted through the office past colleagues I had worked with for years was almost unbearable. Some avoided eye contact, others looked confused or sympathetic. I kept my head high, though inside I was crumbling. At my desk, I quickly gathered photos and personal items into a cardboard box the guard had brought. I was not allowed to access my computer or send any messages. The guard stood uncomfortably close, watching every move as if I might steal something or cause damage. As I was being led out, Heather, Marcus, and Jessica were being brought in by other security personnel. Their faces showed varying degrees of shock and anger. Heather tried to approach me, but her guard stepped between us. Conference room B, Miss Davies, he said firmly. It's going to be okay. I called to them, not believing it myself, but needing to offer something in that moment. Outside the building, the spring sunshine felt surreal against the darkness of what had just happened. I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes, too numb to drive, before texting the team to meet at Riverside Coffee, a shop 2 miles from the office. One by one they arrived, each carrying similar cardboard boxes of hastily collected belongings. Heather's face was flushed with anger. Marcus was quietly devastated, and Jessica had clearly been crying. We claimed a corner table, our boxes piled beside us, like the wreckage of our careers. They're saying we deliberately sabotaged the project, Heather said, her voice shaking. Patricia told me they have documentation of our failure to follow proper protocols. Robert's been building this case for months, Marcus added. Those modified reports you discovered were just the beginning. Jessica wiped fresh tears. What do we do now? I have mortgage payments, student loans. I had no answers for them. As the team leader, I had failed to protect them from Robert's machinations. The weight of that responsibility pressed down on me like a physical force. We sat together for hours, cycling through shock, anger, and attempts at planning next steps. I promised to connect them with my industry contacts, though, in that moment, I had no confidence in my own employability, let alone my ability to help others. When I finally arrived home alone that evening, the full impact hit me. 5 years at Apex, countless 60-hour weeks, sacrificed vacations, and family events, all ended with a humiliating escort out of the building. I sank onto my couch and broke down, completely sobbing until my throat was raw and my eyes burned. As night fell, I spiraled through waves of self-doubt. Had I somehow failed the team? Should I have managed Robert differently? Was I actually incompetent in ways I hadn't recognized? The questions circled endlessly, offering no resolution. Just after 11 p.m., my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, not wanting to speak to anyone in my current state, but some instinct made me pick up. Madison, it's William Chen. His voice was calm, but with an undercurrent of something I couldn't identify. William, I'm sorry about the demonstration. I should have. Madison, he interrupted gently. Did you forget about Section 16.4 of our contract? For a moment, I couldn't place what he was referring to. Then it hit me, the clause I had insisted on specifying that I must remain as project lead for the contract's duration. They fired me today. I said the words, still difficult to say aloud. My entire team, actually. I know, William replied. Richard called me this afternoon to inform me they were making leadership adjustments to get the project back on track. He was quite surprised when I referenced Section 16.4. A small flicker of hope stirred within me. What did he say? He said he would need to consult with their legal team and get back to me. There was a pause before William continued. Madison tech giant values integrity and competence. We chose Apex because of you, not to spite you. I suggest you review that contract carefully tonight. After we hung up, I dug out my copy of the contract from my home office files. Section 16.4 was there in black and white. The parties acknowledged that this agreement is contingent upon Madison Bennett remaining in the position of project lead for the duration of the implementation. Any change to this arrangement must be mutually agreed upon in writing by both parties. For the first time since entering that conference room, I felt a glimmer of control returning. I had no idea what would happen next, but I was no longer completely powerless. Robert had been so focused on eliminating me that he had forgotten the contractual protection I had secured, and now that oversight might cost Apex dearly. I spent much of the night reviewing the contract, specifically the wording of Section 16.4. The language was unambiguous. My position as project lead was a condition of the agreement, and any change required mutual written consent from both Apex and tech giant. By terminating my employment without consulting, tech giant Apex had created a clear breach of contract. As I reread the clause for perhaps the 20th time, my emotions were deeply mixed. There was vindication in knowing that my foresight had created this protection, but also uncertainty about what steps to take next. My primary concern remained my team, who had been collateral damage in Robert's vendetta against me. At 6:15 a.m., my phone rang, startling me from a restless sleep on the couch, where I had finally collapsed with the contract still open beside me. It was Heather, her voice tense with excitement. Madison, something's happening at Apex. I just got a text from Diana in accounting. Apparently Richard called an emergency board meeting at 5 a.m., and there are lawyers everywhere. Did she say why, I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Tech giant sent some kind of formal notice first thing this morning. Diana doesn't know the details, but she said Richard looks like he's seen a ghost. As we were speaking, another call came through from a number I didn't recognize. Heather, I need to take this. I'll call you right back. The second caller identified himself as David Greenspan from Tech Giant's legal department. Miss Bennett, I'm calling to inform you that Tech Giant has issued a formal notice of contract suspension to Apex Solutions this morning, citing breach of Section 16.4. We wanted to make you aware as your name is specifically referenced in the notification. What does suspension mean exactly? I asked. It means all work and payments are halted pending resolution of the breach. In this case, resolution would require either your reinstatement as project lead or a mutually agreed amendment to the contract terms. After thanking him for the information, I checked my phone to find 6 missed calls, 3 from Richard, 2 from Patricia in HR, and 1 from Robert. None had left messages, but their panic was evident in the timestamps beginning at 5:30 a.m. and continuing every 20 minutes. I gathered my team for an emergency meeting at my apartment. By 9 a.m., we were all seated around my dining table, sharing what little information we had. Marcus had received a similar flurry of calls from Apex, while Jessica had been contacted by several concerned Tech Giant staff members she had worked with closely. What's our play here? Heather asked, looking to me for direction as she always had. First, we need legal advice, I said. None of us should respond to Apex until we understand our rights and options. I had already contacted Eleanor Watkins, an attorney specializing in employment law whom Rachel had recommended. She agreed to meet us that afternoon and advised us not to communicate with Apex in the meantime. While waiting for our appointment, news began filtering in through industry contacts. Apex's stock had dropped 30% in the first hour of trading as rumors of the Tech Giant contract suspension spread. The technology sector was surprisingly small, and word traveled fast when a $50 million contract was in jeopardy. Former colleagues began reaching out with information and support. Diana from accounting sent Heather screenshots of internal emails showing Richard demanding a complete review of the contract. Another colleague reported that Robert had been seen shouting at the legal team, blaming them for not catching the clause during the termination process. At 2 p.m., we met with Eleanor at her downtown office. After reviewing our termination documents and a copy of the Tech Giant contract, she leaned back in her chair with a small smile. In 20 years of practice, I've rarely seen executives shoot themselves in the foot quite this spectacularly, she said. Your terminations were clearly retaliatory, and this contract clause gives you exceptional leverage. What should we do? Marcus asked. For now, nothing, Eleanor advised. Let Apex sweat. They're legally exposed on multiple fronts: breach of the Tech Giant contract, potential wrongful termination suits from all of you, and possibly shareholder litigation if the stock continues to plummet. Time is on your side. As predicted, Apex's damage control efforts began in earnest. Richard left 3 more voicemails, each more conciliatory than the last, eventually offering to discuss a path forward that addresses everyone's concerns. Robert, meanwhile, sent a text message that revealed his unchanged perspective. Your sabotage of this company won't be forgotten. William sent an official letter to both Apex and me stating that Tech Giant was reviewing all options, including contract termination and engagement with alternative vendors. The letter specifically mentioned their continued confidence in my team's technical approach and project management methodology. That afternoon, I received an unexpected email from Alexandra Torres, CEO of Novus Tech, a rising competitor to Apex. I've heard about the situation at Apex. I'd like to discuss potential opportunities for you and your team at Novus. We're particularly interested in expanding our enterprise implementation services. This email sparked an idea. Rather than returning to the toxic environment at Apex, perhaps there was another path forward. I discussed it with my team, who were unanimously supportive of exploring options with Novus or other companies where we could work together. By the following morning, Richard was desperate enough to show up at my apartment unannounced. When I opened the door to his knock, he looked like he hadn't slept in days, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. Madison, we need to talk. He said, his voice lacking its usual confidence. The board has authorized me to offer you and your team reinstatement with substantial raises and a formal apology. I'm represented by counsel now, Richard. I replied calmly. Any offers should go through Eleanor Watkins. This isn't just a legal matter, he pressed. The future of Apex is at stake. The stock has fallen 40%. Major shareholders are demanding action. Perhaps you should have considered that before allowing Robert to systematically undermine the project and then fire the entire team, I said, surprised by my own composure. Richard's facade cracked slightly. Robert has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. We recognize there may have been management issues that contributed to the project challenges. May have been. I echoed incredulously. Richard, he deliberately sabotaged technical specifications, excluded me from client meetings, modified my reports to management, and created a hostile work environment that you enabled by refusing to hear any perspective but his. He had the grace to look ashamed. I'm trying to make this right, Madison. It's too late for that, I told him. Any further communication needs to go through my attorney. After closing the door on Richard, I called Alexandra at Novus Tech and arranged a meeting for the following day. If we were going to leverage this situation, I wanted to ensure the best possible outcome for my team. The meeting with Alexandra exceeded my expectations. Novus was smaller than Apex but growing rapidly with a reputation for technical excellence and a collaborative culture. Alexandra was particularly interested in our experience with enterprise-scale implementations like tech giants. We've been wanting to move into that market segment, she explained, but lacked the team with proven experience. Your group would be the perfect foundation. We come as a package, I stated firmly, and we'd want executive-level positions commensurate with our experience and market value. Alexandra smiled. I wouldn't have it any other way. I believe in keeping high-performing teams together. As for positions, how does Vice President of Implementation Services sound for you with director-level roles for your team members? The offer was better than I had dared hope for. There was one more piece to secure. There's also the matter of the tech giant contract, I said. They've suspended work with Apex but haven't officially terminated yet. They might be open to transferring the project to a new vendor, particularly if the same team was leading the implementation. An interesting possibility, Alexandra agreed. Would you be comfortable facilitating that conversation? By the end of the meeting, we had a framework agreement for all four of us to join Novus in leadership positions, contingent upon reference checks and formal offer letters. As we left the Novus offices, there was a new energy among us, a sense of possibility replacing the despair of just days before. That evening, tech giant formally terminated their contract with Apex, citing irreparable breach of contract terms and loss of confidence in vendor capability. The technology news sites immediately picked up the story with headlines highlighting the $50 million contract loss. Apex's stock fell another 15% in after-hours trading. I felt no joy in Apex's troubles, only a sense that justice was being served. Robert's actions and Richard's negligence had created this situation, not me. My focus now was on building something new at Novus, hopefully with the tech giant project as our foundation. As the pieces began falling into place, I felt my confidence returning. The path forward was becoming clear, and for the first time in months I was excited about my professional future, rather than dreading each day. What had begun as a devastating blow was transforming into an unexpected opportunity not just for me but for my entire team. The week following our meeting with Alexandra was a whirlwind of negotiations and planning. She moved quickly, understanding the unique opportunity presented by both our team's availability and the tech giant situation. By Wednesday, we all had formal offer letters with compensation packages that exceeded our expectations. Heather, Marcus, and Jessica would become directors of their respective specialties, while I would join the executive team as Vice President of Implementation Services. Meanwhile, Tech Giant was eager to restart their project with minimal disruption. William arranged a meeting with Alexandra and me to discuss transferring the contract to Novus Tech. The meeting was held at Tech Giant's headquarters in the same conference room where we had conducted the initial proposal presentations nearly 2 years earlier. We've conducted due diligence on Novus, William began, and while your company is smaller than Apex, your technical capabilities and project success rate are impressive. More importantly, you've demonstrated the ethical leadership we value by bringing in Madison's team intact. Alexandra responded with the confidence that had built her company from a small consultancy to a respected industry player. Tech Giant's project aligns perfectly with our growth strategy. With Madison's team leading the implementation, we can ensure continuity while providing the organizational support they need to succeed. William turned to me. Madison, based on everything that's happened, would you recommend we essentially restart with the original technical approach you designed? Absolutely, I replied without hesitation. The core architecture is sound. The issues arose when fundamental elements were changed mid-implementation. With proper governance and clear decision authority, we can deliver what was originally promised. By the end of the meeting, Tech Giant had agreed in principle to transfer the project to Novus, pending legal review and contract negotiations. The revised contract would be valued at $65 million, reflecting additional requirements Tech Giant had identified since the original agreement, and a more realistic timeline based on the restart. The news of Tech Giant's new partnership with Novus broke the following day, sending shockwaves through the industry. Apex's stock plummeted, further triggering shareholder demands for leadership changes. Richard issued a public statement taking responsibility for management failures that led to the loss of a significant client relationship and announcing that Robert had been terminated following an internal investigation. Our first day at Novus was surreal. Alexandra had arranged for new offices, equipment, and support staff ready for our arrival. The entire company gathered for a welcome breakfast, where she introduced us as the leadership team for the new Enterprise Solutions division. The culture difference from Apex was immediately apparent. Everyone from administrative staff to senior engineers approached us with genuine enthusiasm for collaboration. As we began setting up the Tech Giant project environment, I was struck by how different the process felt without the constant undermining and political maneuvering that had characterized our time at Apex. We implemented proper governance structures, clear decision pathways, and transparent communication protocols, things that should have been in place from the beginning. William and his team visited our offices for the project kickoff meeting, bringing the revised requirements and expectations. When he saw the methodical approach we were taking to rebuild the foundation, he nodded with approval. "This is what I expected when we chose Apex initially," he commented. "I'm glad we finally have the right team and the right environment." 3 months into the rebuild, we hit our first major milestone: the successful integration of Tech Giant's customer data with the new platform architecture. The demonstration that had failed so spectacularly at Apex went flawlessly at Novus, with every test case performing as expected. William's team applauded when the final validation report showed 0 critical issues. "This is exactly what enterprise software implementation should look like," he said during the review meeting. "Methodical, transparent, and drama-free." An industry publication ran a feature article about the project turnaround, highlighting my leadership through adversity as an example of professional resilience. Without naming names, the article contrasted toxic management approaches with healthy collaborative environments, using the Tech Giant implementation as a case study. Alexandra forwarded the article to the entire company with a note. "This is why culture matters as much as technical excellence." The contrast between my experience at Apex and Novus became more apparent each day. At Apex, 60-hour weeks had been the norm, with constant stress and fear driving our efforts. At Novus, we worked intensely but sustainably, with Alexandra insisting that burnout was neither necessary nor productive. For the first time in years, I had evenings and weekends to reconnect with friends and family, rebuilding the personal life I had sacrificed for my career. My team flourished in their new roles. Heather expanded the technical team with skilled engineers who shared our collaborative approach. Marcus implemented architectural review processes that caught potential issues early, avoiding the costly mid-project corrections that had plagued us at Apex. Jessica developed deeper relationships with Tech Giant stakeholders, ensuring requirements were fully understood before implementation began. 6 months into the project, we were ahead of schedule and under budget, a stark contrast to the constant crises at Apex. The team celebrated each milestone with genuine pride, knowing we were building something valuable without the toxic dynamics that had previously surrounded us. When we delivered the first phase of the system to Tech Giant for user acceptance testing, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. William's team reported 97% satisfaction with the functionality, and the few issues identified were minor and easily addressed. It's remarkable what the same team can accomplish in a different environment, William commented during our review meeting. This is what we originally envisioned when we selected your team, Madison. My confidence, which had been so deeply shaken by the Apex experience, returned stronger than before. I began mentoring younger project managers at Novus, sharing lessons learned and helping them develop both technical and leadership skills. The trauma of my firing gradually transformed into valuable perspective that I could use to help others navigate difficult professional situations. 9 months into our time at Novus, I unexpectedly encountered Robert at an industry conference in Chicago. I was scheduled to speak on a panel about enterprise software implementation best practices representing Novus alongside executives from other leading firms. As I entered the conference center, I spotted him in the lobby looking noticeably older and less polished than he had at Apex. When our eyes met, his expression hardened with resentment. Rather than avoid the encounter, I approached him directly. "Hello, Robert," I said calmly. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I'm sure you didn't," he replied coldly. "Enjoying your victory lap." "I'm enjoying building something meaningful with a supportive team," I corrected, something that should have been possible at Apex. He gave a dismissive laugh. "Always the victim, aren't you, Madison? You engineered that contract clause specifically to cause maximum damage when you inevitably failed." The accusation was so backward it was almost comical. "The clause was there to protect the client's interests. You're the one who chose to ignore it." "Apex will recover," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. "These setbacks are temporary." "I hope they do," I replied honestly. "A lot of good people still work there." As I walked away, I realized that Robert remained trapped in his narrative of victimhood and sabotage, unable to recognize his own role in the disaster that had unfolded. In contrast, I had moved forward, building something positive from the ashes of that experience. Later that day, I learned that Apex had undergone a complete executive overhaul with Richard and several board members stepping down under shareholder pressure. The company was refocusing on smaller projects, having lost several major clients following the tech giant debacle. While I took no pleasure in their struggles, there was a certain poetic justice in seeing consequences for the toxic leadership that had caused so much unnecessary pain. More importantly, our team was thriving, delivering exceptional results in an environment that valued collaboration over competition and transparency over politics. As the tech giant project continued to progress successfully, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. What had seemed like a career-ending disaster had ultimately led to a far better situation for everyone on my team. Sometimes I realized what feels like failure is actually the beginning of something much more valuable. 1 year after that fateful Friday when Robert fired us, my team gathered for a celebration dinner at an upscale restaurant overlooking the city. We had many reasons to celebrate. The tech giant project was completing ahead of schedule. Our enterprise solutions division at Novus had grown from just the 4 of us to over 30 talented professionals, and we had just secured another major contract with a Fortune 100 company. As we raised our glasses in a toast, I looked around at the faces of people who had stood by me through the darkest professional period of my life. Heather was now leading a team of 15 developers, her technical brilliance finally receiving the recognition it deserved. Marcus had established an architecture practice that was becoming known throughout the industry for innovation and reliability. Jessica had been promoted to Senior Director of Client Relations, managing relationships with our growing portfolio of enterprise clients. "To resilience," I said, raising my glass, "and to finding where we truly belong." The journey from that humiliating escort out of Apex to our current success had been transformative in ways I never could have anticipated. While the professional vindication was satisfying, the deeper lessons had changed not just my career but my entire approach to life. My leadership philosophy had evolved dramatically. At Apex, even before Robert's sabotage, I had often driven myself and my team, relentlessly measuring success primarily through deliverables and client satisfaction. Now, I understood that sustainable excellence required nurturing the humans behind the work, a lesson Alexandra had modeled from our first day at Novus. This shift was evident in how our department operated. We had implemented transparent decision-making processes, clear escalation paths for concerns, and regular check-ins focused on both professional and personal well-being. Burnout, which had been a badge of honor at Apex, was treated as a system failure at Novus, with Alexandra personally intervening if she noticed anyone regularly working excessive hours. The experience had also taught me the critical importance of documentation in professional settings. What had begun as a defensive measure against Robert's manipulation had become standard practice in our department. All major decisions, especially changes to approved plans, were documented with rationales and impact assessments. This practice had saved us countless hours of confusion and rework on the tech giant project. Perhaps most valuable was the lesson about relationship building. My genuine connection with William, based on honesty and mutual respect, had ultimately saved not just my career, but those of my entire team. In the cutthroat environment of Apex, relationships had often been transactional and superficial. At Novus, we invested time in understanding our clients as people, not just revenue sources. 3 months after our celebration dinner, I received an invitation to speak at a major industry conference about project recovery and resilience. The organizer mentioned that my story had become something of a legend in project management circles, with the contract clause that saved my team referred to as the Madison clause by legal professionals. As I prepared my presentation, I reflected on how differently things might have turned out without that clause. Robert's vindictiveness and Richard's negligence would likely have gone unchallenged, with my team scattered to different companies and the tech giant project ultimately failing. A single paragraph in a 100-page contract had changed the trajectory of multiple careers and companies. My physical and mental health had recovered from the trauma of the Apex experience. The insomnia and anxiety attacks that had plagued me during Robert's campaign of undermining had gradually subsided as I settled into the supportive environment at Novus. I had reclaimed my personal life, rediscovering hobbies and friendships that had been sacrificed to 60-hour work weeks and constant crisis management. At an industry event later that year, I encountered several former Apex colleagues who had survived the company's downsizing and restructuring. They shared that the culture had improved significantly under new leadership, with more transparent communication and accountability at the executive level. While Apex would likely never regain its former market position, it had become a healthier place to work, a silver lining to the painful lessons its leadership had learned. The most unexpected outcome of my firing was how it had opened doors for others. Several women in technology had reached out to share how my story had given them courage to stand up to similar undermining in their own workplaces. A junior project manager at Novus told me she had negotiated better terms in a client contract after hearing about my experience protecting both herself and the company from potential future conflicts. Looking back on the entire experience from the vantage point of our success, I realized that what Robert had intended as a career-ending move had instead been the catalyst for unprecedented growth, both professionally and personally. By trying to diminish me, he had inadvertently set me free from a toxic environment that had been slowly crushing my spirit long before the firing. The truest measure of healing came when I realized I no longer harbored anger toward Robert or Richard. Their actions had been deplorable, but carrying that resentment only tied me to the past. The best revenge wasn't their downfall, but my team's success and happiness in our new environment. The tech giant project was eventually completed 2 months ahead of schedule, and slightly under budget, earning Novus a performance bonus and a 5-year maintenance contract. William hosted a completion celebration where he presented our team with a custom trophy engraved with resilience, excellence, integrity, 3 values that had been sorely missing in our previous environment but defined our approach at Novus. As I look toward the future, I'm grateful for the difficult lessons that brought me here. I now understand that true professional success isn't measured by titles or project sizes, but by the integrity with which we conduct ourselves, the supportive environments we create, and the positive impact we have on others, careers, and lives. If you've ever faced workplace toxicity or been undervalued professionally, I hope my story gives you courage. Have you ever had a contract clause or documented evidence save you in a professional situation, or have you found unexpected success after what seemed like career disaster? Share your experiences in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe for more stories about professional resilience and workplace navigation. The path forward isn't always clear when you're in the middle of injustice, but sometimes what feels like your lowest moment is actually the beginning of your greatest chapter. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you the strength to stand in your truth, whatever challenges you may face.